that point, no, she was not.
And at this time, this was in the middle of his detoxification process, correct?
Yes.
Did you see Ms. Heard that evening?
I can't remember.
Do you recall Ms. Heard seeking medical treatment from you for any physical injuries while you were on the island in August 2014? Go ahead.
No, I don't.
If Ms. Heard had sought treatment from you for injuries, is that something you would have documented?
Yes, I would have.
Is that something you would have remembered her telling you?
Yes.
Did you see Ms. Heard after this evening of August 17th?
On that particular evening, that I can't remember. But I did see Ms. Heard pretty much daily during my time on the island.
So did you see her at some point, perhaps, did you see her the next day?
Yes.
And did you observe any injuries to Ms. Heard at that time?
No.
She didn't have any bruises that you observed?
No.
After you met with Mr. Depp that evening of August 17th, did you go back to his accommodations at some point?
No, I think we resolved the issues where we were outside of his little hut, his home.
So you didn't go and attend to him again in his home after that time?
No.
Alex, could you please pull up what's been marked as Kipper Exhibit 8? Thank you. Dr. Kipper, I think do you remember this email from earlier in your deposition?
Yes, I do.
And I believe you testified that you recall sending this email to Ms. Dombrowski on August 18th, 2014, correct?
Yes.
At the time you wrote this email, how long had you known Mr. Depp?
Approximately 4 months.
And in those 4 months, how much time had you spent with Mr. Depp in person?
I couldn't give you a cumulative number of hours, but I would say, I would estimate that including up until August 18, I would guesstimate 20 hours.
Is it fair to say that when you wrote this email, most of the time you had known Mr. Depp or spent with Mr. Depp was while he was in detox?
Yes.
During the time that you were with Mr. Depp on the island for his detox process, did you ever witness him physically abuse Ms. Heard?
No, never.
Did you ever see any physical evidence that Mr. Depp had abused Ms. Heard?
No. Same answer, never.
And during your time on the island, did you witness Ms. Heard abuse Mr. Depp in any way?
No.
Do you recall when Ms. Heard first became your patient?
No, I couldn't give you a definitive date.
It would have been before October 2014, though, correct?
Yes.
And it would have been after Mr. Depp's detox on the island in August 2014. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. When you started treating Ms. Heard, did you assign a nurse to her? When you started treating Ms. Heard, was there a nurse that you assigned to her?
I can't recall whether Ms. Myers, it was when I started to treat her. At some point, I did assign a nurse to her, but I can't tell you which came first. I believe I was treating her before I had recommended a nurse for her.
So your recollection is that you started treating her, and after that, a nurse was assigned?
That's my memory, yes.
Do you have a sense of how close in time to you beginning your treatment the nurse was assigned to Ms. Heard?
It couldn't have been too long, but I honestly can't give you a specific reference of time.
Do you remember that nurse's name?
Erin Borum.
And is Ms. Borum a registered nurse?
Yes.
And I believe you covered this earlier. Ms. Borum is a contractor for you?
Yes.
But she reports to you with respect to your patients that she covers.
Correct.
During the time that Ms. Heard was your patient and she had a nurse, Ms. Borum was assigned to her, how regular was Ms. Borum checking in with Ms. Heard?
Very regular. Very regular. She saw her, yes.
Would she have seen her on a daily basis?
I don't believe it was a daily basis, but I know had daily contact with her in some way.
Would Ms. Borum have seen Ms. Heard in person on at least a weekly basis?
Yes.
Were there times that Ms. Borum traveled with Ms. Heard?
Yes.
And as a registered nurse, does Ms. Borum have an obligation to report any suspected abuse of her patient to you? Alex, could you please pull up document H? Alex, is this Kipper Exhibit 34? Yes. Okay. Dr. Kipper, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's an initial intake of that care.
I'm going to scroll down a bit and just show you that there are future entries on this document as well. Do you see these?
I do. I'm assuming, I don't want to make an assumption, but I would believe these notes are from Erin Borum. But if you'll give me a second to look at this, I can be more specific.
Certainly. Let me know if you'd like me to scroll through the document a bit more. I can do that for you.
Yes, these are notes from Erin Borum.
Does this document reflect any of your own notes on Ms. Heard?
This reflects my treatment recommendations.
But these are Miss Borum's notes.
Yes. Yes.
Did you ask Miss Borum to maintain these notes?
Yes.
And for what purpose?
Because she was monitoring a patient, and I needed to be informed of how the patient was doing and for any adjustments of treatment.
Did you tell Ms. Borum what type of information should be documented in the notes?
No.
And would there be anything that you expressly asked her not to document?
No.
Do you understand that Ms. Borum used her training and judgment in preparing these notes?
Yes, I do.
You weren't telling her what to include in these notes. She was drafting them on her own. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Have you reviewed these notes before?
I have reviewed these notes.
Have you reviewed them in their entirety?
Yes, but not recently.
And how often would you review Ms. Borum's notes on Ms. Hurd?
I review my nurse's notes as they come in, so that would be on a real-time basis.
Okay. And going back to the first page, do you see this entry is dated August 27th, 2014?
Yes.
Does this refresh your recollection as to when Ms. Borum would have been assigned to Ms. Hurd?
Yes.
And does this at all refresh your recollection as to when you started treating Ms. Hurd?
Yes, this would be about the time.
During the time that you treated Ms. Hurd, did she ever seek treatment from you for injuries that appeared to be the result of domestic abuse?
No, she did not.
Did she ever seek treatment from you for any injuries that she told you were caused by Mr. Depp?
No, she did not.
And did Ms. Hurd ever tell you that Mr. Depp abused her?
No, she did not.
And you never witnessed any physical abuse by Mr. Depp against Ms. Hurd during the time that you treated both of them?
No, never.
If Ms. Bourne observed that Ms. Hurd had any physical injuries, is this something that would have been documented in her patient notes for Ms. Hurd?
Yes, absolutely.
In March 2015, you traveled down to Australia to attend to Mr. Depp, is that right?
Yes.
And at the time, Mr. Depp was already in Australia, correct?
Correct.
And was Ms. Lloyd with him?
Yes.
And was Ms. Hurd with him?
Yes.
You arrived in Australia. When did you first see Mr. Depp?
I believe it was the day after I arrived.
And where did you see him?
I saw him at his home in Australia.
And how long did you meet with him during that time?
Probably an hour.
When you first met with Mr. Depp in Australia, did you see the home that he was staying in?
Yes.
And was it a standalone house?
Yes.
Was there a fence around the house?
I'm sorry?
Was there a fence around the house?
That I can't recall.
Do you recall whether Mr. Depp's security team was at the property?
Yes, they were.
Where did you see them?
I saw them in and around the house.
Do you recall how many security personnel there were?
2 to 3.
Now, after you arrived in Australia, at some point you were notified that Mr. Depp had been injured, correct?
Yes.
And I believe this was covered earlier in your deposition. You actually received a text message from Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
And after you received that message, did you go directly to Mr. Depp?
Yes.
And Miss Lloyd came with you?
Yes.
And I believe you said that Mr. Depp was outside the property in a car at that time, right?
That's correct.
Was Mr. Depp's security team there with him?
Yes.
And you examined Mr. Depp in the car with his security team present?
Yes, I saw him seated in the car when I arrived.
Did Mr. Depp tell you what had happened to his finger at that time?
Yes.
How long did you attend to Mr. Depp outside of the house?
Not long, probably a half hour, because I needed to get him to the emergency room.
So immediately after meeting him at the house, you went with him to the emergency room?
Yes, I cleaned his wound to the best that I could with the supplies that we had, and then took him. So it was within a half hour that we left.
Did you return to the house after bringing Mr. Depp to the hospital?
No, I was taken back to my hotel.
After you attended to Mr. Depp and before you went to the hospital with him, did you go inside the house?
No.
You did not go inside the property the day that Mr. Depp contacted you about his injured finger?
No, I did go into the house, as I had stated, that after I saw him initially, I went into the home to see the home.
That was before you went to the hospital with him?
Yes, I went in to instruct one of the people with him to look for the tip of the finger, hoping that we would be able to put it back.
Was the tip of the finger found?
It was found.
Who found it?
I believe this man was their chef.
And do you know where he found it or where he told you he found it?
He said he found it in the kitchen area.
When you went into the house, did you see Miss Heard?
Yes.
And how did she appear?
She was certainly upset.
Did Miss Heard seek any medical attention from you for any injuries at that time?
No.
Did Miss Heard seek any medical attention from Miss Lloyd at that time?
No.
Did you observe any physical injuries to Miss Heard when you saw her that on March 2nd, 2015?
No.
So Miss Heard did not have any observable bruises that you saw?
That's correct.
And did Miss Heard appear to have a broken nose? Was Miss Heard's face swollen at all when you saw her?
Not that I was aware of, no.
Did Miss Heard have any cuts on her arms when you saw her?
Not that I can recall.
Did you recall seeing any cuts on her feet or any other part of her body?
I can't recall.
If Miss Heard had appeared to have been injured, is this something that you would have documented?
Yes.
broken glass in the house?
Yes.
Could you tell what the glass was from?
No.
Was there blood around the broken glass?
There was blood around the home, as I had previously mentioned, but I didn't specifically see blood on glass.
Where did you see the broken glass?
In the kitchen area.
And that's where the top part of the finger was found as well?
Yes.
Alex, could you please bring up what I believe was marked as Kipper Exhibit 17? Dr. Kipper, you recognize this document from earlier in the deposition?
Yes.
It's a letter dated March 15th, 2015 from you to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
And you did send this letter to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
Alex, could you please pull up what I've marked as document K, and I believe will be Kipper Exhibit 35. Dr. Kipper, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what is it?
If you could just, for my verification, can you scroll down to the bottom, please?
Sure. It goes on for 2 pages.
Yes, I'm familiar with this document, yes.
Did you prepare this document?
No.
Is this a document that was prepared by someone who works for you?
This was prepared by Monroe Tinker, who is a nurse practitioner who worked for me at that time.
Is this a record that's ordinarily prepared and maintained in the course of your business?
Yes.
And have you reviewed this document before?
Yes.
When would you have reviewed it?
I reviewed it immediately after the visit, probably the next day. And I also reviewed this a couple weeks ago.
And I'd just like to direct your attention to the last page. Is this your signature here?
Yes.
And when would you have signed this?
That was confirming that I reviewed Mr. Tinker's notes.
Going back to the top, this is a patient record for Ms. Heard, correct?
Yes.
And this, where it says date December 17th, 2015, is that the date of this, that's the date of this document?
Yes.
And the document states phone call consultation headache, correct?
Yes.
So does that mean that on December 17th, 2015, Ms. Heard called the offices to report a headache?
Yes.
And right below this, there's a paragraph that starts out with HPI. What does that stand for?
History of present illness.
And is the information in this paragraph what Ms. Heard reported during her phone consultation?
That's what's written. I was not there, but that's what's written.
states today the patient reports a headache after she bumped her head while standing up 2 days ago, correct?
Yes.
And a couple sentences below that, it says last seen in the office on 12/23/2015. Is that an error, or did she come back in later?
No, I think that's got to be an error.
So based on this document, it's your understanding that Ms. Hurd called the office on December 17th.
Yes.
Scrolling down to the bottom here, it says objective data physical exam. Do you see that?
Yes.
Does that mean that Ms. Hurd came into the offices for a physical examination?
That's what it signifies, yes.
And would that have also been on December 17th, 2015?
Yes. This note reflects that visit. Everything in this note reflects that visit.
And so Monroe would have also performed that physical examination?
Monroe did perform that physical examination. I did not see Ms. Hurd. Monroe saw Ms. Hurd.
And the information below this heading of physical exam, which goes on to the next page, are these the findings from Ms. Hurd's physical exam on December 17th?
Correct.
And if Ms. Hurd had any physical injuries, would those have been noted in this portion of the document?
Yes.
And there are some medical terms in here, but so if you could let me know, does any of this indicate that there were physical injuries that were documented?
No.
Does this document indicate that a concussion check was performed?
Yes.
And what were the results of that?
Under the assessment and plan as written, Mr. Tinker did not indicate concussion under his assessment.
Under assessment and plan, item 4 says that Dr. Kipper is aware of the medical plan and is in agreement. That's consistent with your recollection?
Yes.
And I believe you testified you didn't see Ms. Hurd on December 17th, correct?
That's correct.
How were you informed of the medical plan?
I spoke to Mr. Tinker by telephone.
And would that conversation have happened on the 17th as well?
Yes.
Alex, could you please pull up document L? And I believe this is what will be marked as Kipper Exhibit 36. Dr. Kipper, do you recognize this document?